Alright, cut. Cut. That was good. That was good, guys. Alright, that was good. I'm thinking we get a wide angle, and then we're done. Okay?
Alright, yeah, cool.
Like, how much further? Like,
a little more. A little more.
you got?
Yeah.
January 7th, 2022. A grainy video appears online. At first, it looks harmless. Just a group of kids filming a project. Laughing. Talking. Nothing unusual. But then, something goes wrong. The cameraman stumbles. The frame glitches. And just like that, he's gone.
Hello?
Before we go any further, you need to understand something. This place, the Backrooms, was never supposed to exist. It happens faster than you could ever prepare for. One moment, you are walking a corridor you've walked 100 times, the fluorescent lights above and linoleum below holding you safely in place. Then a single step lands wrong. The floor does not give way so much as it simply ceases to be relevant. It all started with a simple image posted online. An empty office space, yellow walls, buzzing lights, and beneath it, a caption. If you're not careful, and you no-clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the Backrooms. No clipping, a video game glitch, phasing through walls into places you're not meant to be. But what if it wasn't just a glitch? The cameraman regains consciousness. What greeted him was yellow, the color of old offices and forgotten waiting rooms. The walls stretch endlessly. The lights hum too loud. The air feels stale. The carpet is damp. A maze without doors or windows, without a way out.
Hello?
He calls out.
Hello?
Nothing answers.
Hey, guys.
But he isn't alone. He wanders for what feels like hours before he rounds a corner and catches a glimpse of something moving. Just a shape or a shadow peeking out from behind the next corner before disappearing.
Hello? Is someone there?
Crude charcoal arrows drawn on the walls guide him forward. Someone has been here. He finds a crack in the wall. Looking through, he sees a hallway. It stretches on forever. Above, a ladder passes through a hole in the ceiling and continues up, higher than he can possibly see. As he walks further, he finds drawings, haphazard and childlike, with distorted eyes and faces scratched into the plaster, a face with a window cut through it. And surrounding everything, there are tiny handprints on the walls, but far too high for children to reach. 7 feet, at least. Beneath the drawings are 4 words. Don't move. Stay still. But he does not stay still. The shriek that follows is unlike anything a human throat should be able to produce. Or perhaps It is exactly what a human throat produces after it has been inside the backrooms long enough, filtered through whatever this place does to living things, until it comes out sounding like a scream transmitted through a broken radio. It echoes through the corridors and bounces back again, ricocheting in every direction at once. He runs. The thing behind him is impossibly tall and impossibly thin, its proportions drawn from a child's sketch across a chalkboard. It is black, liquid, and hollow all at once, and it doesn't run so much as it collapses and reassembles through the corridors, always just behind him. He reaches a room of mirroring doorways and throws himself through the nearest one, tumbling into a dark hole that seems to go on forever. He survives the fall, but he doesn't escape. He's in a basement now, in front of a stairwell. He ascends and finds another building. Apartments, with balconies overlooking an empty courtyard. Its rooms were furnished and its lights operational, despite being devoid of any single living soul. The loneliness of this place is its own kind of horror. A hotel full of rooms, all the beds made, all the taps working. No footprints in the dust. No sounds except the humming of lights. And somewhere far away, the soft sounds of that thing still looking for him. A place meant for people, but no one is here. He finds an exit, runs through it, and ends up back where he started.
You gotta be kidding me.
There is no exit. There never was. He can hear the thing moving through the walls. The cameraman runs, turns. Too late. The creature catches him. It wraps around him, like it's absorbing him. The back rooms did not always exist in this way. Something made it accessible. Something tore through the skin of the world and left it open. The company was called Async Research Facility. Their stated purpose, in documents marked for limited eyes only, was the development of a low-proximity magnetic distortion system. What that meant in practice was this: a room in Southern California filled with humming machinery, staffed by researchers who had signed papers they did not fully understand, pointing a device at the fabric of space and pressing a button. On October 17th, 1989, during the 6th test, they succeeded. On that same day, an earthquake tore across the San Andreas Fault, collapsing bridges and shattering roads from San Jose to Oakland. The seismologists had no explanation. Async's researchers had every explanation, and told no one. What they had opened was not merely a doorway. The distortion of space-time sent ripples outward, and across the nation, perhaps across the world, tiny tears began to appear. In garage floors, in basement corners, in the wrong step at the end of a familiar corridor. They were called null zones, and they were invisible, and they vibrated at a frequency just below the threshold of human perception. And anyone who stepped into one was simply gone. Missing persons reports skyrocketed in early 1990. The first body was found on February 3rd. The research team, tethered to reality by a rope laid along the floor, came across it in one of the yellow corridors. The corpse was mostly consumed, not by time. Decomposition had been stalled somehow by the biology of the place, but by something else entirely. A black fungus had spread across the body and up the walls, climbing toward the ceiling in intricate, searching tendrils. The color matched something the team had seen before, in quick glimpses, at the far end of hallways, moving. The autopsy report, dated 2 days later, identified the organism as harmless in the outside world. But in the back rooms, the environment had done something to it, enhanced it, and weaponized it. The bacteria fed on living tissue while simultaneously preserving it, like it wanted to eat slowly, to savor. The doctor's final question, recorded on tape, was addressed to Async's vice president. "Mr. Beck, may I ask where this subject came from?" Ivan Beck did not answer on camera. There were those who began to suspect that the creatures, the tall black things, the fluid-limbed screaming forms, were not separate from the fungus at all, that they were what a human body eventually becomes after long enough inside. The bacteria takes hold. It changes things. It builds something new from the wreckage of a person, something that retains just enough of what it was to make it monstrous. Because some people swore that the creatures screamed in human voices. Researcher Marvin Lee was the first of Async's team to hear it. On May 6, 1990, he fell through one of the holes in the complex's floor, a room of carpet-covered pits that his team had been crossing on a routine expedition, and landed in a lower section. Beneath him was what appeared to be an entire neighborhood, houses with night skies painted above them, streets without cars, gardens without wind. It was a copy of the world, a crude, uncomprehending imitation. From somewhere inside one of the houses, he heard crying.
"Can anybody hear us?"
He went toward it. He could not help himself. That's what the voice is for. The thing that met him was not a person. It had been, perhaps. Its scream, when it lunged, carried the full register of human agony. The sound was so precise, so achingly familiar in its shape, that your body believed it before your mind could object. Marvin ran through room after room of the fake neighborhood, through hallways that blurred into each other, until his team above finally hauled him back up by rope. He was coughing. Even through the hazmat suit, the Backrooms had gotten into him. "That is not a person," one of his colleagues said, watching the footage back in the lab. The words were quiet, almost reverent. The way you speak when you have just confirmed something you were hoping was wrong. Peter Tench disappeared on February 29th. He did not die. He was not taken by the creatures or consumed by the fungus. What happened to Peter was quieter, and in many ways more terrible. He was displaced. A null zone in the complex pushed him 3 months forward through time, depositing him at the new threshold door in May 1990, exactly when Async was hosting representatives from the Department of Energy, smiling and pointing at the future. Async had already held his funeral. His wife had buried an empty coffin. His children had been told their father was gone. They brought him in quietly, put him underground in the lab, and told him they would integrate him back into society when the time was right. They said it would take weeks. He waited. The weeks became months. He began to understand that the time would never be right, that there was no version of the future in which Async allowed a man who knew everything to walk freely back into the world. He escaped into the complex. He survived there alone, learning its rhythms and its rules, watching Async's teams from the ceiling. He made maps in his head. He grew lean and careful and furious. When he finally confronted Marvin's research team in an unmapped corridor in May, he was holding a shotgun he had taken from their colleague Mark. "They faked my death," he said, and his voice was the voice of a man who had rehearsed this sentence so many times in the dark that it had worn smooth. "My wife and children think I'm dead. Let people know I'm alive." He escaped through a freight elevator. Async announced the following morning that Peter Tench had been found dead on a hillside, the result of a fall. Somewhere in the surveillance footage from a city street, hours later, a figure that might have been Peter Tench walked away from the camera into the night. No one at Async mentioned it. By 1995, the Backrooms had been changing. Async had been building inside it, expanding cautiously into the yellow maze, installing rooms and hallways and signage and living quarters. Because their pitch to the government had been accepted and their funding had been approved. Infinite storage, infinite real estate. The hunger of capital pointed at a pocket dimension. But the Backrooms had also been building. A man named Robbie fell into the complex through a null zone in his basement in 1995 and found a world that bore no resemblance to the featureless corridors of 1991. There were office spaces and apartment blocks. There were classrooms with the chairs piled against the door as though something had been trying to get in. There were playgrounds, empty of children, the swings moving. There were posters dated 2022 on the walls, pulled backwards through time from a future that had not happened yet. The complex was learning, not from Async's blueprints, but from memory. From the accumulated imprints of every person who had ever been lost inside of it. It was assembling a world from fragments, a kitchen countertop corner here, an abandoned couch there, the wallpaper pattern of a barn, the light fixtures of a school corridor. It was trying, with terrible sincerity and only partial comprehension, to make a place where humans could be comfortable, because it needed them to stay. Robbie found a house near the end of his time in the complex that was different from the rest. It was lived in. A bottle of whiskey on the kitchen table, footprints on the floor, a shoe embedded in the floorboards, as though whoever had been wearing it had struggled and finally wrenched themselves free and left it behind. Through a tear in the wall, he spoke with someone in the real world, a man in his own home, confused by the voice coming from his basement. They worked together to open the gap between them. For one moment, the wall between dimensions was thin enough to touch. Then the null zone activated, and Robbie was somewhere else entirely. His final recording showed him sitting with his back against a yellow wall, camera in his lap, battery dying. He talked about his friends. He talked about the sky. His voice was even and unhurried, the voice of a man who has made peace with something very large and very cold. The screen went dark. The lights in the back rooms are fluorescent, standard issue, run on argon gas. The researchers noted this with some relief. Everything, they said, was perfectly normal. But the serial numbers on the fittings traced back to a factory in Pennsylvania. The manufacturing date stamped into the metal was May 1973. Async Research Facility had not built those lights. Nobody had. They were simply there, in the ceiling of a place that should not exist, installed by hands that left no record, illuminating halls that had been waiting for decades, perhaps for centuries, for someone to no-clip in. Somewhere in Southern California, the portal is still open. The null zones are still appearing in garages and shopping malls, and in the gap between one step and the next. The missing persons statistics have never fully recovered. And somewhere in the yellow maze, something with a human voice is calling out,
Can anybody hear us?